thank you everyone. So, so I think he's Namrata is just telling him about Anil Kumar's 21-day fast. So Namrata, we had a word with him as well. So he spoke in front of everyone, and he mentioned like Sonam sir is his inspiration, and he'll be supporting our cause as well. And on behalf of all Bengaluru sir, we welcome you, and you are such an inspiration to all of us. And how you are leading this cause is very much inspirational for today's generation. Like we were just listening to Gandhi ji's how he did the protest. Now we are witnessing it. It's we are like very honored to have you here, sir. Sir, please. The audience is like, waiting for a long time for you, and. Sandeep, you want to go first or?
I'm okay either way.
Alright. So,
Yeah.
alright.
You want me to go first?
Sure. So we have Sandeep as well here. So he's also a very renowned activist in Bangalore.
Just
He has
focus
done
it wherever you
lot of amazing things.
Don't exit.
So Sandeep, why don't you introduce yourself first, and what all amazing things you have done for Bangalore, so that everyone gets inspired here, and we'll continue this group which we have formed because of Sonam sir to like oppose Vikas ke naam pe Vinash.
Thank you, Nupur. Namaste, everyone. Namaste, Sonam Manshukji. You have blessed us with your presence today, and I'm becoming speechless, which I'm not normally. Today, we really truly feel blessed by your presence, because we've been, all of Bengaluru, I mean, a whole lot of us have been closely following the Save Ladakh campaign, and a lot of us identify with it in very interesting ways. Nupur, I'm sorry, I won't, I don't think I can carry out your request to talk about myself. All I'll say is I'm just a civic activist. I work in the space of sustainability, governance, local governance, and environmentalism. And why a lot of people in our community feel we can identify with the Save Ladakh campaign is very simple. I think the Save Ladakh campaign, the sixth schedule demand, it simply is demand for Swaraj, as Gandhiji had envisioned it. Literally any place I go to and give a talk on topics of governance, topics of planning, topics of environmentalism, topics of sustainability, I always ask people, have you read Hind Swaraj? Have any of you read the Hind Swaraj? How many of you have read the Hind Swaraj? 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's barely about 2 or 3% of the population here. And this is a tragedy for our country. You know why? Because in 1908, Gandhiji wrote this book when he launched the freedom struggle, literally. And this was his vision for what our country should be when it becomes free. So this was his template for Free India, the Hind Swaraj. It's a very small book, barely 100 pages, in it which he actually rolls out a chapter by chapter presentation on what India should become, how it should decolonize, how it should go back to its roots, how it should overcome the challenges that it was, which he foresaw. 110 years back, he said that urbanization will destroy our planet. In this book, 110 years back, he said factory production will destroy the planet. In this book. In this book, he explained what Swaraj is in his mind. He meant people should have complete power to determine their futures. the power to determine how their local environment is governed, how people should have the power to determine the fate of their local communities. This is what he explained as Swaraj. In fact, he went to the extent of saying in this very book that if the British gave us Swaraj, the power to determine the fates of our local communities, I have nothing against them. I don't even want them to leave. In this very book. So his concept of Swaraj was that people should have the power to determine their destinies. And it doesn't matter who the ruler or whatever it is. So his entire idea of freedom, democracy was one of local empowerment. You might term it the principle of subsidiarity, where local people have the utmost right to determine what has to happen in their own surroundings. Which is why, of course, surprisingly, after independence, we missed the bus on this. Our constitution did not factor in the third tier, fourth tier and fifth tier of governance. To some extent, it existed more during the times of the British, because many of our great freedom fighters were incubated in local government. Can you name a few of them? Name a few of our great freedom fighters who were incubated in local government. They are big names. No. No. Okay, you might be right actually, I might not be aware. So I'll jump, cut to the chase. Jawaharlal Nehru was the mayor of Allahabad. He was a product of local government, of a city government. Vallabhbhai Patel was the mayor of Ahmedabad. He was a product of local government. Subhash Chandra Bose, he was mayor of Calcutta. He was a product of local self-government. How shocking it is that Nehru was a product of local government after independence, created a system so centralized that we only had a central government and a state government. Cities did not have governments. Panchayats were ignored. It was corrected. Okay. It was corrected to an extent during. Oh. Okay. Fine. It was corrected to an extent in the 80s, 70s and 80s when we tried to put together the 73rd and 74th Amendment. Then came the Forest Rights Act. Then came the 6th Schedule. These have all been attempts to find the Swaraj of Gandhiji's dreams, where environment, stewardship and local governance and planning have the stamp of local communities, which is why we identify with the 6th Schedule demand of Ladakh. Similarly, we Bangaloreans are going through one of the worst environmental crises in our times. We have terrible water crisis going on. Our city is going through extreme environmental distress. We have lost 97% of green cover in the last 5 decades. Are you aware of this? In the 1970s, our green cover was how much? 70%. I know it. So we had 70% green cover in 1970. In the last 5 decades, it's come down to 2%. And we have lost about 95% of our wetlands in the same period. Concretization has come to about almost 90%. And today, we don't have groundwater. And we are completely dependent on a water source 100 kilometers away. For a city which gets 17 to 24 TMC of rainfall, we are still depending on Kaveri for just 10 to 15 TMC of water. So you can see how perverted our ideas of governance have become, of management have become. We don't have a master plan for the city. Our green spaces have destroyed, and the sustainability of our city is at great risk. Which is why, unfortunately, the 74th Amendment, though passed 30 years ago, we still haven't implemented it. We don't have a metropolitan planning committee which has to plan for the city through a collaborative approach with citizens. We don't have a decentralized city government, we don't have functional ward committees, we don't have functional area sabhas. So our demand for our city to save our own environment, to have better planning and better governance of our city is the same as Ladakh is asking. We need 74th Amendment implemented. We need to have a decentralized devolved city government. We need to have an autonomous planning authority. Therefore, we completely identify with your cause because it is also our cause. Strange as it may seem, we welcome you for gracing our occasion today. We are in complete support of you. We support the local self-government aspirations of the people of Ladakh. May you succeed. Thank you, sir.
So now I want to welcome you, sir, to speak some word and address the audience.
Yeah, Julie. Julie. Yes. Julie, namaskar, salam. Thank you so much. I'm very touched to see all of you here to support Ladakh and the planet Earth actually. So connects to wherever we are to take good care of our own home, which is what the earth is. So thank you all of you from different parts of Bangalore. Thank you the students from Ladakh, and thank you the organizers of Friends of Ladakh, Friends of Nature. And many of you may have connected to Ladakh, visited Ladakh, or may be planning to. So thank you for keeping that connection beyond just photographs of a place, but standing for it when there is a need. And as you all know, we have been appealing and reminding the government for safeguards to the mountain ecologies and the indigenous tribal cultures that thrive in the mountains, which is what our forefathers who made the Indian Constitution foresaw. And not only does this great country tolerate diversity of cultures, but it actually encourages, and that's what we see in the 6th schedule. Similarly, how Sandeep ji touched on local self-governance. Locals can best take care of their area and their homes because they have to live and they have to suffer for every mistake that is made, and therefore we actually connect with similar reasons, even if one is very remote, mountainous, indigenous people's cultures, and the other is a metropolitan city. But when it comes to self-governance or local governance, we connect in many ways. You would have heard most of what I have to say in my updates, or will in the coming days. I'll just add some things that I may not have said, but I very much believe and would like everybody who lives on this planet to think about. And that is that we human beings today living on this planet, in big cities to small villages in the mountains, particularly big cities, are living in a way that has become actually very violent. We may not see violence as we are conditioned to see, but there is violence all around. Just the way we live has become violent. We may not see people running after one another with knives and daggers and bows and arrows or guns even, but if you see beyond what you can see, there's so much violence, from human to rest of our siblings in nature. If you just look at humans, which is not the right way, we are not the only children of nature, we are just one of them. We have many siblings, but even among humans, which we care a bit too much about, there's so much violence. Every year, you would know 7 to 10 million people die only of air pollution alone, which is only one of the reasons of environmental challenges. Now, I was reading about this few years ago. Only air pollution. Others put together, it would be maybe 2 times. What is 70 to 10 million? That's 1 crore. 1 crore people dying every year. Is that very serious or is it not? I don't know. I can't get a feel. So I was looking up on the internet, when did people die in large numbers and what was that rate? I came across, of course, First and Second World War. So it appears that during these 2 wars, roughly 100 million people died, 10 crore, over roughly 10 years. So per year it comes to 10 million, which is what we hear today are dying, 7 to 10 million. So actually a 3rd World War is not something that may happen in future. A 3rd World War is already on, where such number of human beings are dying and more, many more of our siblings are dying. As I said few weeks ago, by now they're saying 70% of our wildlife is wiped away. Our siblings, our cousins, brothers, sisters in the wild are completely wiped away from the face of earth. It's not like few are killed here and there. They're extinction. 1/3 of the forest is gone and 100 million of human beings are going, and still we don't see the violence in it. Still we think there's no problem, there's no emergency. So everything needs to change. Looking at all this, we need to see things differently, because we were discussing on the way how people don't see it as urgent. People, very aware, very sensitive ones like you all turn up. Others don't understand, yet others couldn't care less. But that's because we don't see these new forms of phenomena which we have never seen. If we relate it to what we know, then maybe we are touched a little more. So that's why I'm saying it's like First World War and Second World War already, or actually even worse. First, to understand, our cities in India, they say people's lives are shortened by 7 to 10 years in the cities because of these, environmental reasons. So a granny who was to live till 75 would be dying at 65, and we don't call that violence. A baby may develop or grow with problems, challenges of the brain, and we don't call that violence. We only call violence knives and guns and so on. And there's a reason I see why. We're very good, we're very innovative species. Why? There's so much about violence written, understood all around the world, just that what is happening today is not put in that cast. So we don't see it this way, therefore we don't care so much. But if you think of, we care so much about our religion. We are ready to do anything for our religions, right? And what do all the religions teach us? Non-violence. Any religion worth the name teaches non-violence, peace. And if non-violence is so important, then why don't we see this violence today? But perhaps there is also a reason why this violence doesn't fit in the violence that we are conditioned to understand. And my hypothesis is that violence was a big issue long time ago. Long time ago, physical violence was a big issue. If you go back in history, we were farmers, then we were hunter-gatherers, and we were in the forest, didn't have any rules or norms or laws, order, very little of it. So think of a time, maybe 15,000, 20,000 years ago, where there was no order, there was no law, rules, etc. Might was right. Yeah? Whoever was strong could decide what is right and what is wrong. If you don't agree with me, if I am strong, I'll break open your skull and the matter is settled. So that was perhaps long time ago the norm. Then some of our thinkers who were very innovative said that these bullies or these monsters cannot be tamed. So being very innovative, as I said, they invented religion. I, as a scientist, would say that actually man made God rather than God made men. My personal feeling, you may agree or not. So innovative, they made a concept of such a strong being to which even the strongest monster was humbled and subdued, and slowly your accounts will be settled by this supreme power, and if you do bad you will get it much worse. Slowly worked. So the concept of God slowly worked, and today I really think religions have done a wonderful job. We can find it out by again looking up on internet. You should try. I did some 2 years ago. I was looking at causes of death in today's world, causes of death. And I looked up violence of this kind, physical violence with guns, daggers. It was down somewhere number 26th. So it was not even an issue, which I think was the number one cause of death long ago. And therefore, every region of the world came up very strangely with the same solution of faith in a supreme power that taught ahimsa, non-violence, peace. And therefore, because it worked, that form of violence has gone down to number 26. So what is number 1, 2, 3 today, if not guns and daggers? Today it is all environmental reasons. And others like, what do you call this, heart problems and such. Yeah? Lifestyle problems and environmental challenges are the top killers of today. So shouldn't we be as clever as our ancestors to adapt our idea of violence? Why don't we see pollution as an extreme form of violence if 70 lakh to 1 crore people die every year? How can we not call it violence? Why does it have to be a bomb falling and killing people with blood on the ground like in a war in Ukraine or something? How is this different from a war, what is happening in Bangalore, in Beijing, in Delhi? Why can't we see this slow death of elderly people, of birds and of animals, wildlife and so on? Therefore, why can't we define this as a form of violence? Therefore, why can't we upgrade our religions from, say, Hinduism to Hinduism 2.0, Buddhism 2.0, Islam 2.0, which also considers this form of violence that we are doing with our lifestyles. So, until we redefine religion, redefine God to update to current times, our problems will not be solved. And it will not do good to our religions also, because if they are 2,000 or 5,000 years outdated, there will be very few who will follow them. And that's what is already happening. In Europe, churches go empty. Maybe here also very few care, because they talk of a time when guns and daggers were the main instrument of violence. Today it has changed, so we need to upgrade to these times. Our laws are also behind. They talk of right to life, but when it is slow killing and slow poisoning with air pollution, it doesn't recognize. Why can't we claim right to life and stop this kind of development and change it so that no birds, no animals, no human beings are harmed or killed because of this kind of development or vikas ke naam par vinash. So we'll have to redefine religion, redefine law, redefine education to groom our young people to understand how to live better on this planet. So it is part of this larger thinking that we believe, like you believe here, that people who live in their own regions should have more control and think of future generations, and not just today, and not just for human beings, that too few human beings who have all the power and money. It should be, when we talk of Vasudeva Kutumbakam, it should not be just human beings of India and China and Europe and so on. It should be the entire nature. We are all brothers and sisters, and therefore we say that especially Himalayas, it's the source of water, it's the third pole which gives us water. It has to have some respect and a special care, because you will be cutting your own lifeline if you try and look for money in that lifeline. Yeah? So we need to have special consideration for fragile ecosystems that on which we all depend. It's the classic proverbial, cutting the branch that you are sitting on. I used to laugh as a child to read that in the textbooks, but today we see rampant case of exactly that. We are cutting our own existence. Like you said in Bangalore, how with this explosion of development, vikas ya vinash, life is becoming difficult for people here. So will it be everywhere. And urbanization at large scale anyway can be huge problem. COVID has shown us how contagious viruses can kill so many, and I think COVID was one of the mildest. There can be, like, it had 3% mortality or so. There can be 30%, 50%, and these big cities will be the first target. There will be hardly any left in such cities. So decentralized, rural, healthy, natural life is what perhaps is the answer, like Sandeep was saying. So once again I would say that thank you all for taking care of not just the mountains and supporting people there to safeguard their environment, their culture, but also taking good care of Bangalore, of Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. If each of us take care of our own surroundings, say 10 square kilometers, we try to do things we try to make people aware, sensitize about these issues, how it is not only harmful, but it is not right on any level, from updated legal to updated religious. It stands nowhere right to live as if we are the only ones and today is the only time on this planet. This arrogance we need to change, and therefore I thank you all for taking good care of your own surroundings also. And if we each take care of our own place, then the nation will take care of itself. We won't need to do much if each citizen takes care of their own areas, and the planet will take good care of itself. So thank you so much for being such, sensitive hearts. It takes a lot of empathy and sensitivity to bring yourselves time and again to support a very remote place, but in reality we are supporting the entire Prakriti nature and this planet. So I would once again heartfelt thanks from all the people of Ladakh, and not just people, the glaciers, the black-necked cranes, the snow leopards, the marmots, and all the birds and bees. I thank you all for this support. Thank you. Thank you.
Jule Kale. So on behalf of all the Student Association of Ladakh and all the people here, I want to honor Kale with Kathaks.
So we'll do an interactive session, so you can answer the questions that have come up in people's minds. And I'm sure that people have come here to ask questions to you. I'll start with one of my own though. You are a leading scientist and innovator icon of this nation. Ironically, we see that the academic community, which knows best about the environmental problems, is probably the last to come out. Even though there are a lot of students here today, it's an unusual picture. What would you say to the academic community, which can come out but refuses to, is reluctant to?
When you say academic community, it's to do with head more, and it takes more of heart to feel for the pain of other people, other animals, other beings. So I would urge everybody to feel as much as to only think and learn and make a career out of it, make a mission out of it.
Questions?
Hello, Sir Jule. I'm a very big fan of you. Thank you very much. I saw the Three Idiots movie, and then after that I become a big fan. I didn't know that you were the inspiration behind the movie. Thank you very much. I had a small question. Like in one video, you mentioned, like you were very young at that time. You mentioned that Ladakhians can think long term. Like they just don't think about themselves, but they also think for the future generation. So I think we also can do that, but where do you think we lost this faculty, or did we develop this long-term thinking in the first place?
Thank you very much. It's not that Ladakhis can, of course everybody can, just that any ancient culture, any traditional wisdom talks about looking at few generations ahead and not just for today and tomorrow. Unfortunately, today's instant cash, instant profit kind of approach, which perhaps is a part of how we are brought up in our education system, makes us only think of ourselves and only think of quick gain and not the consequences. It makes us think of income but not impact that we would leave, positive or negative. So that we could learn much better from indigenous cultures, ancient wisdom of India, which unfortunately much of which has been lost in urbanization, in metropolitan growth and so on, and you can see more of it in these indigenous tribal communities, whether they are in the forests of Andhra Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, or the mountains of Sikkim, Ladakh, Himachal. So I always say these are what can make us a Vishwa Guru, where we can teach the world to be sensitive to others and future, and live in a way that it doesn't harm others, and live with contentment, happiness, with minimal resources. You know, much of Western knowledge system, engineering or whatever, talks a lot about efficiency. They're very much about efficiency, but efficiency of living life is not understood. So you will consume so much resources and get such little happiness. That's so efficient, but this is not recognized. So we need to create or adopt or bring back new approaches, new values, or not really new, but renewed old values. Thank you.
Just one small request, when you ask questions, don't turn it into a speech, keep it a short question. Just come forward.
Thank you for what you're doing. I've heard you before also, and today when I hear you, you talked about violence. The violence which we didn't recognize earlier, but we should do now. And we talked about animals, environment, not harm to others. But in this others, we often forget the animals we consume every day. I mean, the resources that is being consumed, that, and the animals who are enslaved every day for this. What about their right to live? What about their right to freedom? What about their right to safety? Isn't it too selfish of us to only talk about us and the wild animals? What about them? They are overbred every year, like 15,000 crore every year, to be enslaved, killed for human greed. We don't have to do this. What are your thoughts on this?
Yes, as we become able to do sustainable farming, it's the lowest energy form for survival to have vegetarian diet. But if you look into the past, then there is nature's food chain and so on. So I hold a kind of neutral view. I feel evolution should take us towards lowest level of energy, which is not feeding bulls and cows and goats with what could be eaten directly and making the process longer and much more energy intensive. It makes more sense to directly consume what we can. But I can understand, because of evolution and culture, if some people would evolve slowly towards that. I wouldn't food shame them, but I would try and help the whole planet to slowly grow towards efficient ways of surviving.
Yeah, just one point. Why are we calling them as they're individuals just like us? And that's the only point I wanted to.
You wanted to ask?
Yes, sir. It's not about ecology or environment. I know you are a visionary from your videos, from your intellect. I already know. It's about what happened last night. I came to know that you are visiting Bangalore, so I wanted to spread that information. So I put the status and in all the groups, WhatsApp or other social media and everywhere. In WhatsApp family group, when I put it, and some of them just accused that don't follow this guy, or he's funded by China. It's, I know. In 2020, you only initiated prohibit China's or that thing. I know, but how to convince them, or is it a waste of time to convince them, or it's I already did many times, but it's still a waste of time, I realize, because we can't change, I believe, unless they want to change or they realize it for nobody noticing or posting it on them. I don't know how to handle them. Their family.
I don't think you need to convince them. They already know. They are very skillful advocates of some idea. So it's not that they don't know that this is what they're saying is not true. So I wouldn't waste time on that.
Okay, there are a few questions from this side. So just all of you combined together, it's ready.
Sir, a quick question. I've been to Ladakh, fortunately, about 3 to 4 times, and the last couple of times was not as a tourist. I went into the interiors. What I found over time was that the economic situation within Ladakh actually had improved tremendously. There were a lot more houses, a lot more, but At the same time, I have a very specific question here. When you talk of environment degradation, whom exactly is to blame? Are we talking of people from outside of Ladakh who are creating an environment which is derogatory, or is it also people from within Ladakh who, in the quest of economic surgeons, also taking liberties with the environment? That's a question for you.
Do you want to answer that singly, or do you want to take two questions?
So it's not about who, as much about what's being done. It doesn't matter. I mean, I can be as destructive or maybe more destructive than somebody from outside. It's not about inside, outside, but making this fragile ecosystem sustain and live happily. So I always, in Ladakh, I'm more known for saying, save Ladakh from Ladakhis, yeah? That's only because people start thinking, oh, it has to be saved from somebody from outside. Harm is harm, whether it's done by somebody from outside or inside. Just that when it is big, rich corporates, the harm will be exponentially much bigger than some villager who has little stray. So therefore, it has to be protected from both.
Yeah, all the forms of violence that you mentioned today, all of those go back to what you just mentioned, corporates, their profit, and in general, how the society is run, capitalism. So why not recognize capitalism as the form of violence today, and talk about the religion 2.0?
Yes, but before blaming others, we'll need to become more wise and efficient as citizens or people or consumers. As long as we need so much more than what is necessary, more greed than need, there'll be corporations, there'll be capitalists trying to provide. After all, they're doing what you need. If you reduce your needs, then there'll be less of those who will destroy nature. So that's why I say we want government to make policies to protect our mountains, but we also need people in Bangalore, Beijing, Paris to use less. If you use less, then you'll have less reasons to come for lithium and uranium and all that. So it's, after all, it's our consumption pattern. We need 2 pairs of shoes, but we have 20, and that's the problem. So both ends it has to change, but it has to change at the individual level most importantly.
So aren't we also told that we need 20 pairs of shoes, and also as you said, 10 square kilometers, but the things that are being looted away, the mountains, the lithium, the uranium, it's not used within the 10 square kilometers or even within the nation. So how do you relate to that? Thank you.
All these need to change now that we see the consequences of 200 years of this approach. We need to change. Otherwise, we are encouraged, pushed to buy 20 pairs. That's how our GDP will rise. Otherwise, we'll be a poor nation. But a poor nation with happy people is not a problem. It's unhappy, rich nations.
Okay, we'll end with 3 more questions.
Hello, sir. Big fan of yours. Sir, I would like to know your take on very small topic, that is tourism. So I know that if I want to know about something, I'll visit some places and I'll get to know what all sites are there. So like this, I got to know about Goa way before Ladakh because of tourism and the promotion. But again, we know how touristic activities have degraded, such, for example, Uttarakhand. So what is your take on that environment?
So tourism can be very good also and very bad also. In its form as travelers and explorers, people get to know the planet they are living on, people who they don't know, cultures they don't know. It's a wonderful educative experience. I'm not against travel or tourism, but when it is mismanaged, when it is only about few places and herds of people just going to destroy the place, then it is a sad story. But if it is spread out to rural areas where young people are coming to cities, for income, economy, if you can bring that at their doorsteps through tourism, it's not a bad thing. In Ladakh, the problem I say is with 5 lakh tourists coming and descending on 5 square kilometers, whereas Ladakh is 50,000 square kilometers. So 5 square kilometers in 5 months of the year. Spread it on 50,000 square kilometers, 12 months of the year, and let them be travelers and explorers. There'll be much better outcomes.
Hello Sonam sir. So hi Sonam sir. So my friend Harin, he introduced me. He is from Kargil. He is my classmate. So I got to know about your achievement, great things. So I'll keep my question short. So I came today's program in here protest about Vikas ke naam par Vinash. So but we cannot deny the basic necessities of the people. I mean, to stop the Vikas, I mean excessive Vikas, there should be some alternatives and the slow progression towards a more minimalistic lifestyle. So I would like, I would want to know some suggestions. What, as individuals, we can slowly bring the changes in our life to a more sustainable living, which will help in protecting the environment and protecting the resources in fragile parts of the country like Ladakh and other things. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have gone astray to think that more money, more material, more things will give us more happiness, like I was saying. That's because the modern economics seems to say that, and we follow blindly for growth, for development and so on. But if you look at Indian wisdom, ancient Indian wisdom, please note, and I think this should make us Vishwaguru. 2,500 years ago, way before industrialization and all these things, Buddha taught us, and which could be a teaching for the whole world. He said, for a human being, it is a greater achievement to eliminate a single desire than to fulfill 1,000 desires. Yeah? So a topper, a successful person, maybe different things in your minds, but he said a big successful person is not the one who has 10 houses and 40 pairs of shoes, but the one who has eliminated a desire than fulfilled 1,000. Now that really is what it is. Our hearts are like buckets into which we throw all the things to thinking it will make us happy. We buy a bicycle, then in few weeks we are not happy. Then we buy a scooter and put it in the bucket, unhappy again. Then a car, then a helicopter, aeroplane, nothing seems to fill that bucket. It turns out that the bucket does not have a bottom. So it's easier to put a bottom to the bucket than to keep throwing things all around the world. So that approach perhaps we need to learn, to be happy with fewer things, and that's what is missing. Now people think that modern economics is different, this is touchy-feely, some ancient wisdom. Then I remember from my engineering days, the best thing I learnt about modern economics in my engineering course was the theory of diminishing returns, the law of diminishing returns. It's beautiful. This is what Buddha was saying. It says that anything gives you a value of satisfaction, like a pair of shoes. When you don't have pair of shoes, the first pair gives you a lot of satisfaction. You buy a second pair, it will not give the same satisfaction. You buy a third, fourth, fifth, by the 21st pair you buy, it hardly gives you satisfaction more than maybe few hours or one party, but it does the same damage as the first pair of shoes. So the utility diminishes with number of things that you get. So modern economics actually says the same, but we don't seem to take that lesson. Now what I say with my little touch is that you still buy the 21st pair of shoes, yeah, but not for yourself, for somebody who doesn't have a pair of shoes. Then you will be the winner. You will have all the satisfaction.
What is the time?
Hi sir. You and people of Ladakh have been fighting for a cause. So I want to know, how do you plan to overcome the suppression the people of Ladakh and your cause has been facing?
The way we are doing, we are not going to fight with guns or, you know, take hostage or inflict pain on others. We'll inflict pain on ourselves and make the people realize that they have wronged the people, and that's the only way we can make permanent change. Otherwise we'll make more enemies than we can make change.
We'll do the absolute last question.
Yeah. Oh, okay, this is not a question. I just want to say this in front of sir, because all our questions are related to how we continue this fight for climate, how we continue our save our climate for our future, for ourselves, for our future generation, right? And the only way we can do this, as Sandeep mentioned, as Sonam sir mentioned, is through mass transformation, through mass support. And as a member of Friends of Ladakh and Friends of Nature, all of us have been organizing this, but I see very little turnout. Every time we announce a gathering, we hardly see 5 or 6 people saying, okay, I'll come. But today I see that because sir is here, we've all come here, but we need to show this support every single time, every single Sunday. We have Sundays for climate. Every single Sunday we gather, show support. Only then we can start making the change. Only then we can see the change for ourselves, you know, promote other people, promote this to other people, support other people for the change. So I request all of you, let us continue this fight for our own climate. We are not doing anything wrong. This is fight for our own climate.
Let's be creative and say those who come here and support will go to heaven next life, and beautiful things everywhere, if not in this life, next life. And those who don't come will go to... I didn't say that.
And on that note, we would like to start a song which says...
Julius Henle. So I am basically from Chamta Jumur. So sir, you are starting a Pashmina march. So I would like to request you, it's not any kind of question, it's a plea and a request. And I would like to request you, sir, that Pashmina march should be held also in Jumur, because in our area, grazing lands were taken by Chinese gradually, and from the point of view, it is becoming more critical, and no one is taking action. And sir, I would like to plead that. Sir, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Your concern will definitely consider when the right time comes.
I'd like to end the questionnaire session with a small question. I'm not sure if you've read the Hind Swaraj. I'm assuming you might have. I believe it should be the National Book of India. If nothing else, it will get read by every citizen, and everybody will contemplate on how we should build a sustainable, devolved, a better managed country. Would you love to support the idea of making it a national book?
Yes, why not? Why not? Yes, after all it.
So we'll start with a song which reminds us that as long as we are alive, we should fight. As long as we are alive, we should strive to bring heaven on this earth, and in this earth itself, unlike what you said, for the next life. So I request everybody to join in. तू जिंदा है तो जिंदगी की जीत पे यकीन कर, अगर कहे है स्वर्ग तो उतार ला जमीन पर। तू जिंदा है, तू जिंदा है तो जिंदगी की जीत पे यकीन कर, अगर कहे है स्वर्ग तो उतार ला जमीन पर। तू जिंदा है। ये गम के और 4 दिन, सितम के और 4 दिन, ये दिन भी जाएंगे गुजर, गुजर गए 1000 दिन। ये गम के और 4 दिन, सितम के और 4 दिन, ये दिन भी जाएंगे गुजर, गुजर गए 1000 दिन। कभी तो होगी इस चमन पे बहार की नजर, अगर कहीं है स्वर्ग तो उतार ला जमीन पर। तू जिंदा है, तू जिंदा है तो जिंदगी की जीत पे यकीन कर, अगर कहीं है स्वर्ग तो उतार ला जमीन पर। तू जिंदा है।
Now we do all together.
Hello everyone. My name is Wasim and Jule Ganesh. Great to see you guys. Thank you so much for coming.
Hold the mic closer.
Yeah. My name is Wasim and I'm from Nubra Valley, Ladakh. I work here at APU. I'm a researcher on climate ethics. I did a project last year which was very generously funded by Himalayan Institute of Alternatives, and I'm really thankful for that. Yeah, thank you.
Namrata, what's next? What song?
Guys, join us for Hum Honge Kamyab.
Okay.
Start.
shall overcome, we shall overcome, we shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday. We shall overcome, we shall overcome, we shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome.
Can you do group photo? Where do we sit? Here?
कामयाब हम होंगे कामयाब, हम होंगे कामयाब एक दिन। ओ मन में है विश्वास, पूरा है विश्वास, हम होंगे कामयाब एक दिन। नाना जी
Okay, I request everybody now to please assemble alongside the wall for a group photo. Everybody please come and assemble alongside the wall. Let's take a quick group photo before our time expires.
We all want photo with you, so group photo.